This is what happens when you cross your own blood, the reporter whispered to her colleague as I walked up the courthouse steps. I pretended not to hear, but the words followed me like shadows into the marble-floored lobby of the Phoenix courthouse. The desert sun burned through the glass doors behind me, casting my elongated shadow ahead. At 55, I'd stopped believing in dramatic moments of justice, but today might prove me wrong. I straightened the lapels of my navy blazer, the one my mother once said made me look too masculine for a daughter. Today, that criticism felt like armor. Inside courtroom 4B, the air conditioning hummed with quiet efficiency, chilling the sweat at the nape of my neck. My attorney Renee Alvarez, a woman whose calm demeanor masked a strategic brilliance, squeezed my arm briefly before we took our positions. "Are you ready to let this breathe?" she whispered. 30 years of silence weighed against this moment. Was I ready? The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and my sister Erica glided in cream sheath dress, designer sunglasses inappropriate for the fluorescent lighting, Italian heels clicking a steady rhythm against the hardwood floor. Our eyes met across the room. For a fraction of a second, her practiced poise faltered. She hadn't expected to see Joseph sitting solidly in the row behind me, his weathered face calm but resolute. She'd expected me to stand alone. I always had before. The bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Mercer, a sharp-eyed woman with silver-threaded braids and no tolerance for theatrics, took her position. The room settled into expectant silence. "Your Honor," Renee began, her voice cutting through the quiet like a precisely wielded instrument. "We're not just bringing forward intellectual property theft. We have testimony from a former NIH grant officer confirming that Erica Thompson used proprietary research authored by Maria Thompson to secure both federal funding and nonprofit status. This constitutes fraud on both federal and state levels." I could feel the air leave the room. 3 decades of my work, my research, my life stolen by my own sister, displayed on banners bearing her name, celebrated at galas I wasn't invited to attend. The judge's penetrating gaze shifted to me, and suddenly, 15 years of memories flooded back, my twins as babies, my family's rejection, and the long, winding road that led me here, to this moment of reckoning. Flashback, the boardroom betrayal. 30 years of loyalty ended with 18 words. "Maria, we're removing you from the hormone regulation project, effective immediately. Your personal health concerns have become a liability." The sentence hung in Thompson Research's sleek boardroom like an executioner's axe. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating Phoenix's sprawling cityscape beyond a kingdom my father had built, my brother had inherited, and from which I was now being exiled. My brother David, sealed by virtue of being firstborn male, delivered the news without meeting my eyes, his attention fixed on the tablet before him as if reading a mundane quarterly report. My sister Erica, head of the foundation arm, sat beside him with that practiced sympathetic expression she'd perfected for fundraising photos, head tilted just so, eyes softened at the corners, lips curved in what magazines called her compassionate smile. I recognized the performance. I'd watched her rehearse it in mirrors since childhood. "Health concerns," David continued, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany, leaving fingerprints on its perfect surface. "The board feels your condition might impact the project timeline. We can't afford delays with the NIH grant review approaching. My condition: the early menopause diagnosis I confided to our company physician just last week, seeking accommodations for occasional hot flashes that disrupted my lab work." The betrayal stung like acid. "This project is my life's work," I said quietly, my voice steadier than the trembling in my chest. "I've led this research for a decade, and we appreciate your contributions," Erica interjected smoothly, her voice honey-sweet poison. "But David and I feel the Thompson name requires consistent leadership moving forward. The Hormone Therapy Initiative will be the Foundation's flagship project. We need someone who can represent us publicly for the next decade. The Thompson name. My name too, though they'd never truly treated it as such." I glanced at the presentation materials before them, my data, my methodology, my conclusions, all with Erica's name now prominently displayed as principal investigator. Dr. Erica Thompson, whose undergraduate degree was in communications, whose scientific contribution consisted of occasionally touring the lab for promotional photos, wearing a white coat that had never seen a day's actual research. Mother and father agree, David added, as if invoking our parents Robert and Helen Thompson, founders of the company, now semi-retired but still controlling the family trust would silence any protest. It always had before. I ran my fingers over the edge of the folder, remembering late nights in the lab, weekend sacrifice, bedtime stories read to my children over video calls because a critical experiment couldn't be left unattended. All those moments stolen from my personal life to build this research that would now bear someone else's name. My mind flashed to 15 years earlier, when they'd had a similar family meeting upon learning I was pregnant without being married. My mother's words still echoed. You've always been difficult, Maria. Always choosing the hardest path. I thought of my twins at home, Amanda and Michael, now 15 and thriving despite the family's predictions of disaster. I'd stayed then, accepted their conditions to keep my position at the company, allowed them to present a sanitized version of my life to their social circles. Not this time. I rose slowly, gathering my research notebook, the only copy I had of data not yet entered into the company's system. I'll clear my lab by end of day. Maria, David called as I reached the door, his voice carrying a note of surprise. He'd expected compliance, as always. Don't be hasty. We're offering you a lateral move to the cardiovascular division. Same salary, same benefits, same erasure. And Maria, Erica added, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her leather portfolio, don't make this personal. It's just business. I turned back, decades of silenced words rising to my lips. But I swallowed them, as I always had, and simply said, I'll see myself out. Outside, Phoenix's heat hit me like a physical force 102 degrees according to the bank sign across the street. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, and for the first time in years, allowed tears to come. Not elegant, silent tears, but ugly, heaving sobs that left mascara tracks down my cheeks and turned the collar of my silk blouse damp. When the storm passed, I wiped my face with clinical precision, reapplied my lipstick using the rearview mirror, and drove away from Thompson Research, away from 3 decades of being valued for my brain but never quite being seen. At home, the diagnosis and reflection. My house wasn't grand, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet Phoenix suburb, with a small yard where I'd planted jasmine that perfumed the evening air and desert hardy flowers that managed to bloom despite the punishing heat. But it was mine, paid for with years of work my family had consistently undervalued. The answering machine blinked accusingly when I entered 3 messages. I pressed play, mechanically hanging my blazer on the coat rack as the first message began. Dr. Thompson, this is Dr. Winters confirming your test results. The blood work confirms early onset menopause, which, at 55, is perfectly within normal parameters. Nothing to be concerned about, Maria. Call me if you need to discuss treatment options. Normal. I almost laughed. In the Thompson family, women were expected to be exceptional or invisible. Middle ground didn't exist. The second message was from Amanda. Mom, Michael and I are staying late at school. He has art club, and I'm working on my science fair project. Joseph's picking us up. Love you. The third was from Joseph himself. Maria, I'm taking the kids for pizza after their activities. Join us at Gino's if you're done early. Either way, we'll be home by 8. Simple, ordinary messages that suddenly felt extraordinarily precious. No agenda, no manipulation, just communication. I moved to the kitchen window, gazing at the citrus tree I'd planted when we first moved in. The twins had been small then, just 5, still asking when they could visit Grandma and Grandpa's big house again. I never had the heart to tell them the full truth that my pregnancy had been treated as a family scandal, that their existence had been ashamed to be managed, that their father Joseph had been deemed unsuitable despite his own family's wealth because he'd walked away from his inheritance to build his own life. He has no commitment to legacy, my father had said dismissively when I introduced Joseph as the father of my unborn children. A man who abandons his birthright will abandon you too. 15 years later, Joseph was still here, still steady, still choosing us every day without fanfare or conditions. The kitchen table was covered with Amanda's science project, a genetic analysis inspired by my work. She had my analytical mind and her father's quiet determination. Michael's sketches lay beside hers. He'd inherited his grandmother Martha's artistic talent, the only trait my mother had ever praised in me before deciding it was impractical. I picked up the framed photo of grandmother Martha, the only family member who truly seen me. In the picture, she sat in her garden, white hair gleaming in sunlight, sapphire ring glinting on her hand as she tended her prize roses. You were right, I whispered to her image. Sometimes family is who you choose. I remembered the day she'd slipped her sapphire ring into my palm at my sister's wedding, whispering, "This belongs to the daughter who sees people as they are, not what they can give." After her death, Erica had claimed it publicly, and I'd stayed silent. Martha would have been disappointed in my cowardice. "They're treating your research the same way they treated my garden designs," Martha had told me once, when I was just starting at Thompson Research. "Your father dismissed my landscaping plans as hobby work until his golf partner's wife asked who designed our garden. Suddenly, they were the Thompson Gardens, his vision, his concept. The parallel hadn't registered then. It screamed at me now. The front door opened, and Amanda's voice called out, "Mom, are you home early?" I quickly wiped my eyes. My children had never seen me cry, and today wouldn't be the first. In the kitchen, I called back, my voice betraying nothing of the earthquake that had just shifted my professional foundations. Amanda appeared in the doorway, tall and serious at 15, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, brown eyes missing nothing. "You never come home at 3. A statement, not a question. My analytical daughter, always observing, cataloging, concluding. I had an unexpected opening in my schedule, I said, the lie tasting bitter. She studied me with the same intensity she applied to her microscope slides. "They did something, didn't they?" "Grandfather?" "Uncle David." I sometimes forgot how perceptive she was, how carefully she'd been watching the family dynamics all these years. "Let's talk when Michael gets home," I said finally. "And your father. Some changes are coming, and I want to discuss them with all of you together." Amanda nodded, accepting the delay but not the evasion. "I told Michael last week that something was happening. Uncle David didn't acknowledge your contribution in that press release about the hormone therapy breakthrough." Again, out of the mouths of babes. My children had seen what I had been refusing to see, that my systematic erasure wasn't accidental but intentional. "How did your project advance today?" I asked, changing the subject. As Amanda launched into a detailed explanation of her experimental design, I felt something unexpected beneath my ribs, not just the familiar ache of betrayal, but something sharper, cleaner. Relief. Memory lane, the twins' birth. 15 years earlier, I'd sat in my obstetrician's office, 39 and pregnant, listening to the unexpected news. "Twins," Dr. Bennett had said, pointing to the ultrasound with a kind smile. "Both looking healthy. Strong heartbeats." I remember touching the screen, tears blurring my vision. "My grandmother was a twin," I'd whispered. "She lost her sister in childhood." That evening, I'd sat in my apartment, a sterile, barely decorated space that reflected how little time I spent away from the lab, and tried to imagine it filled with baby laughter. One child had seemed daunting enough. Two felt impossible. Joseph had come over without calling first, something he rarely did. He knocked on the door with that distinctive rhythm of 3 taps, pause, 2 taps that was uniquely his. "I heard," he'd said simply when I opened the door. No explanation of how he knew. Just presence. We'd sat on my uncomfortable sofa, the ultrasound printout between us. "Twins run in your family?" he'd asked. My grandmother sighed. "Skip generations, apparently." He nodded, studying the grainy image. "I'm in, Maria. However you want me to be involved, I'm in. No grand declarations. No dramatic promises. Just quiet certainty." That night, I'd called my parents, hoping foolishly that the miracle of new life might soften their disappointment in my choices. My father had answered, his voice stiff with formality. "I see," he'd said when I shared the news. "Have you considered what's best for the Thompson name?" What he meant was, "Have you considered adoption? Or disappearing until this embarrassment passes?" I'm keeping my babies, I'd said firmly. The silence stretched before his response came. Your mother and I will need to discuss how to handle this with our friends. Handle this. Like a public relations crisis. My mother had called the next day, outlining the conditions for my continued employment at Thomson Research. No public acknowledgement of Joseph as the father, limited visibility of the twins at family functions, and my tacit agreement to play along with the fiction that I was a dedicated but lonely career woman who'd chosen single motherhood through clinical means. It's not ideal, she'd said, voice crisp with the efficiency that had built a biotech empire, but it allows you to maintain your position. Your work is valuable to the company, Maria. My work, but not me. Not my children. Not my choices. The lie had tasted bitter, but I'd swallowed it for the security of my children. For 15 years, I'd worked twice as hard to prove my worth. Watching my research fueled the company's growth while my name faded from reports, my brother taking credit for breakthroughs in board meetings, my sister establishing a foundation based on my hormone research. For 15 years, I'd been the family ghost present but unseen. When the twins were born, Amanda first, then Michael 7 minutes later, Joseph had been in the delivery room, his steady presence anchoring me through 26 hours of labor. My parents had sent an elaborate flower arrangement to the hospital but found excuses not to visit. It's better this way, my mother had said on the phone. Gives you time to adjust without interference. Joseph's parents, estranged from him since he'd walked away from the family banking business, hadn't acknowledged the birth at all. The twins had entered a world with grandparents who existed only in theory. But we'd formed our own family unit, unconventional but solid. Joseph had taken a small apartment 2 blocks from mine, coming over daily, sharing parenting responsibilities without ever pushing for conventional arrangements. When the twins were 3, we'd bought the house together, both names on the deed, separate bedrooms initially, a gradual merging of lives rather than a dramatic leap. By the time the twins started school, teachers assumed we were married, and we'd stopped correcting the assumption. What we had defied simple categories. Partners, co-parents, friends, occasional lovers, none of the labels quite captured the steady, enduring connection we'd built. Why don't you and Dad just get married? Amanda had asked once, around age 8, practical even then. Because we're already a family, I'd answered. Marriage is just paperwork. The truth was more complicated. I'd seen what my mother sacrificed to become Helen Thompson, seen how completely she'd erased her own aspirations to support my father's. I'd watched Erica transform herself into the perfect Thompson daughter, molding herself to fit expectations like clay pressed into a rigid form. I'd chosen a different path, keeping my work, my children, and my relationship in separate spheres that I could control. Compartmentalization as self-preservation. Now, 15 years later, as I stood in my kitchen awaiting my children's return, I wondered if what I'd seen as independence had actually been another form of compliance, playing by their rules, keeping secrets they demanded, accepting less recognition than I deserved. The sound of laughter broke through my thoughts, the front door opening, Michael's artistic enthusiasm, and Joseph's deep chuckle drifting down the hallway. The familiar sounds of my chosen family returning home. Time to tell them everything. The family meeting decision point. Joseph took the news exactly as I expected, with quiet anger that manifested not in raised voices but in the controlled precision with which he sliced vegetables for dinner. The sharper his movements, the deeper his fury. They're using your menopause diagnosis against you? His knife came down on the cutting board with surgical exactness. That's not just unethical, Maria. It's potentially illegal. The twins' reactions diverged in ways that highlighted their personalities. Amanda immediately went into problem-solving mode, pacing the kitchen with my research notebook in hand. We need to document everything, she said, her 15-year-old voice taking on the authority of someone much older. Every email, every research note that proves the timeline of your contributions. Is your early work backed up somewhere outside the Thomson servers? Michael, always more intuitive than analytical, watched me with artist's eyes. You're relieved, he observed softly, his insight cutting through the practical discussions. Underneath everything else, you're relieved this happened. His observation stopped me short. He was right. Beneath the anger and betrayal lay a current of liberation, a severance I hadn't had the courage to initiate myself. I think I am, I admitted. So what now? Joseph asked, setting down his knife and turning to face me fully. Three faces looked to me expectantly, my unusual, unexpected family built outside conventional boundaries. For 15 years, I'd made decisions based primarily on security and stability, choices tempered by fear of what might happen if I lost the Thompson safety net. I'm going to fight, I said, the words feeling strange and powerful in my mouth. Not just walk away this time. Fight for what's mine, my research, my contributions, my intellectual property. Amanda nodded vigorously, already on board. Michael studied me with those thoughtful eyes that missed nothing. Joseph simply waited, allowing me the space to continue. I'll need a lawyer specializing in intellectual property and employment discrimination. I'll need lab space to continue my research independently. I'll need. My voice faltered briefly. I'll need to be prepared for the Thompson machine to come after me with everything they have. We have savings, Joseph said practically. Enough to cover legal fees initially. I have contacts who might help with lab space. That biotech incubator on Phoenix's north side is accepting new residents. I can help with research documentation, Amanda volunteered. I've already read most of your published papers anyway. I'll take care of things here, Michael added quietly. So you can focus on the fight. I looked at these three people who had chosen me when my biological family had offered only conditional acceptance. The emotion that welled up was almost overwhelming. I should have done this years ago, I admitted. You weren't ready then, Joseph said simply. Now you are. After dinner, with the twins occupied with homework, Joseph and I sat on the back patio, the desert evening settling around us with its particular magic, the sky fading to deep blue, stars emerging while the day's heat still radiated from the paving stones. There's something I need to show you, I said, retrieving a battered leather portfolio from my home office. Inside were research notes dating back 20 years, concepts, data, methodologies, all carefully documented and witnessed by trusted lab assistants over the years, kept separate from official Thompson research files. My grandmother taught me to keep duplicate records, I explained. She called it a woman's insurance policy. Joseph leafed through the pages with the reverence of someone who understood their value. Martha knew, didn't she? What they were doing to you. I nodded, remembering my grandmother's subtle warnings, her gentle suggestions that I protect myself. She experienced the same thing in her generation. Her garden designs, her contributions to the early company all absorbed into the Thompson legacy without attribution. Have you ever wondered, Joseph asked carefully, if your mother experienced it too? Before she became what she is now? The question caught me off guard. I'd always seen my mother as complicit in the family's patterns, not as another potential victim of them. She was a chemistry major, I said slowly, remembering details I'd rarely considered. She met my father in graduate school. She was brilliant, actually. Published 2 papers before they married. And after? None. The realization settled heavily. She became Mrs. Robert Thompson, the perfect corporate wife. She stopped talking about chemistry, started hosting dinner parties instead. Perhaps, Joseph suggested gently, what looks like betrayal is really assimilation. Survival. I considered his words, remembering moments from childhood, my mother's brief, fierce encouragement of my scientific interests when my father wasn't present, her insistence that I finish my doctorate before considering marriage, her enigmatic comment when I announced my pregnancy, at least you'll have your research. I had nothing left that was mine. That doesn't excuse what they're doing now, I said firmly. No, Joseph agreed. But understanding the pattern might help you break it. We sat in contemplative silence until the desert chill drove us indoors. That night, I lay awake long after Joseph had fallen asleep in the room that had gradually become ours over the years, thinking about patterns across generations. Grandmother Martha, silently watching her contributions be claimed by the Thompson men. My mother, surrendering her scientific aspirations to become the perfect corporate wife. Erica, contorting herself to fit the role assigned to her, achieving recognition only by claiming my work as her own. And me, accepting partial credit, conditional inclusion, qualified recognition for 15 years. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, I would call Renee Alvarez, the attorney whose recent victory in a medical patent case had made headlines. Tomorrow, I would begin the fight. As if sensing my resolution, Joseph stood beside me, his hand finding mine in the darkness. He didn't speak, didn't ask what I was thinking, just offered connection, as he had for almost 16 years. "Thank you," I whispered, "for staying when everyone said you wouldn't." His fingers tightened around mine. I never considered any other option. Phoenix Biotech, the new beginning. The lab space at Phoenix BioVentures Incubator was nothing like my state-of-the-art facilities at Thomson Research. One-third the size, equipment that was functional but far from cutting edge, and ventilation that struggled against Arizona's summer heat. But the simple metal plaque beside the door made up for every deficiency. Phoenix Biotech, Dr. Maria Thompson, founder and principal researcher, my name. Front and center. No qualifications, no diminishment. I ran my fingers across the engraved letters, a surprisingly strong emotion catching in my throat. At 55, I was starting over, launching the research enterprise I should have founded decades ago. Renee had been brutally honest in our first meeting. "They'll fight dirty," she'd warned, her office filled with awards that testified to her expertise in intellectual property battles. "Family businesses always do. They'll claim you developed everything on company time with company resources, which makes it their intellectual property." "Not everything," I'd replied, sliding my independent research notebooks across her desk. "And not without documentation." She'd spent hours reviewing my materials, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. Finally, she looked up, her expression shifting from professional assessment to genuine determination. "You have a case, Dr. Thompson. A strong one. But this won't be quick or easy." I'd nodded, prepared for the battle ahead. Nothing worthwhile ever is. Now, 3 weeks into establishing my new lab, I was rediscovering the pure joy of research unconstrained by corporate expectations. I'd secured a small grant from a women's health foundation to continue my hormone therapy work, focusing specifically on applications for low-income communities, a direction Thomson Research had deemed insufficiently profitable years ago. When Amanda and Michael first visited the lab after school, their reactions couldn't have been more different. Amanda immediately gravitated toward the equipment, asking detailed questions about my research plans. Michael stood quietly in the center of the room, then began sketching the space, somehow capturing the feeling of possibility in a few pencil strokes. "You're really doing this," Amanda said, her eyes bright with a mixture of pride and concern. Standing up to Grandfather and Uncle David. "I should have done it years ago," I admitted, calibrating a microscope. "Why didn't you?" Michael asked, looking up from his sketch. Always the emotional archaeologist, digging for feelings where his sister sought facts. I paused, considering my answer carefully. I thought keeping peace was more important than keeping my dignity. I was wrong. "Grandmother called yesterday," Amanda said, her tone deliberately casual. "She asked if we were adjusting to the changes." I stiffened slightly. Helen Thompson rarely contacted the twins directly. "What did you tell her?" "That Mom seems happier than we've seen her in years," Michael answered with his characteristic gentle honesty. That made her go quiet. I could imagine my mother's reaction, that momentary flicker of something unnamed behind her perfectly composed expression. Helen Thompson was a master of concealing emotion, a skill she tried and failed to instill in me. "Has Uncle David reached out to you?" Amanda asked, her protective instincts evident. At 15, she was already positioning herself as my defender. "Not directly. His attorney sent a letter claiming all my research belongs to Thomson Research." "That's clearly untrue," Amanda said indignantly. "Intellectual property law establishes that." "Let Renee handle the legal arguments," I interrupted gently. "Your job is to be 15, not my attorney." That evening, as I organized research notes at my new desk, I found myself thinking of my mother. Helen Thompson had been brilliant in her own right, a chemistry major who'd published promising research before marrying my father, abandoning her own career to support his ambitions, to raise the perfect family, to maintain the perfect image. How much of herself had she erased to fit the role she thought she needed to play? Had she recognized the same pattern in me and resented it? or resented that I'd found a way to keep both my career and my children when she'd been forced to choose. I was 3 weeks into establishing my independent research when the invitation arrived, a regional medical innovations conference where researchers presented groundbreaking work in women's health. I'd attended for years as part of Thomson Research. This year, I'd registered as Phoenix Biotech, my small act of rebellion. When I arrived at the downtown convention center, the first thing I saw was the banner, 10 feet tall, silk printed, perfectly lit, Women Leading Health Innovation, the Erica Thompson Foundation. Below it, displayed in elegant typography, were direct quotes from my unpublished research papers. My words, my data, my conclusions, without attribution. I stood frozen, a lifetime of silent compliance warring with newfound courage. This wasn't just professional discourtesy. This was theft in broad daylight, banking on my continued silence. Dr. Thompson? A young event coordinator touched my arm. You're presenting in Panel B, starting in 10 minutes. I nodded mechanically, following her through the convention hall, past researchers who'd known me for years but now glanced at my name badge with confusion. Maria Thompson, Phoenix Biotech. Not Thompson Research. A defector. A traitor to the family name. When my turn came to present, I stepped to the podium, slides ready, clean data, precise methodology, no emotional appeals. But as I looked out at the audience, I saw my sister slip into the back row, her expression a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Something in me shifted, a tectonic plate finally breaking free after years of pressure. For those of you who don't know me, I began, departing from my prepared remarks. I'm Dr. Maria Thompson, founder of Phoenix Biotech and the original researcher behind the hormone regulation technology currently being marketed by the Erica Thompson Foundation. A ripple of whispers moved through the audience. I continued, my voice steady. My research spans 3 decades, beginning with early hormone detection methods I developed during my graduate work, continuing through the targeted delivery systems I pioneered at Thomson Research, and now advancing at Phoenix Biotech, where we're developing accessible testing for underserved populations. I clicked to a slide I'd added last-minute side-by-side images of my original research notebooks and the Foundation's published materials, timestamps clearly visible. Notice the similarities. They're not coincidental. The room had gone completely silent. In the back row, Erica's face remained impassive, but her knuckles had whitened around her designer handbag. I've dedicated my career to advancing women's health technologies. That dedication hasn't changed, though my institutional affiliation has. What has changed is my willingness to remain silent while others claim credit for work they didn't perform. I finished my presentation to stunned silence, followed by a smattering of uncertain applause. As I gathered my materials, I saw Erica had already left, her seat empty. But the damage was done. The whispers had begun. Joseph was waiting in the lobby, having slipped in during my presentation. The aftermath confrontation escalates. That was quite a statement, Joseph said as we walked to his car, his voice carefully neutral. Was it too much? I asked, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving room for doubt. He considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. It was exactly enough. Factual, professional, and impossible to misinterpret. The parking garage was nearly empty, most attendees still engaged in the afternoon sessions. Our footsteps echoed between concrete pillars, marking time like a metronome. She left immediately, I noted. To make phone calls, Joseph replied. The Thompson crisis management machine is already activating. He wasn't wrong. By the time we reached the car, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Emails from former colleagues, some expressing surprise, others quiet support. A text from my brother. We need to talk. Most telling was the missed call from my father's private line, a number he used only for family emergencies. I silenced the phone and slipped it into my pocket. Let them wait. The cease and desist letter arrived by courier the next morning before I'd finished my first cup of coffee. 10 pages of legal threats, demands for retraction, accusations of defamation, and breach of confidentiality. Erica's signature, elegant and flowing at the bottom, the penmanship our mother had insisted she perfect. while allowing my scientific scribble as a regrettable necessity for a research career. Joseph read it over my shoulder, his expression darkening. They're scared. They should be, I said, reaching for my phone to call Renee. What I hadn't expected was David showing up at my lab that afternoon, his luxury sedan parked ostentatiously in the visitor's space, blocking a delivery van. He entered without knocking, looking around with barely concealed disdain. So this is your startup. The word dripped with condescension. I continued pipetting my samples, not looking up. What do you want, David? To avoid a family spectacle. He set his briefcase on my desk, uninvited. Erica is upset, Maria. You're making accusations that could damage the Foundation's reputation. Thomson Research's reputation. They're not accusations if they're true. He sighed dramatically. Always so literal. So inflexible. This is why you never advance beyond research roles. No political savvy. I finally looked up, studying my brother's face, the familiar features now lined with age, the confidence that had always been his birthright as the Thompson heir. But I saw something new too, a fear, hiding behind the arrogance. What are you really afraid of, David? That people will learn you've been putting your name on my research for 30 years? That the Thompson genius your marketing team loves to tout has always been mine? His expression hardened. You were compensated fairly. You had a good position. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing. I earned everything, and you took credit. We're family, he said, as if that explained and excused everything. Family doesn't steal from family. Mother and father are devastated by your ingratitude. His final weapon, the one that had always worked before parental disappointment. I thought of my children, watching, learning. I'm sure they are. But I'm not that desperate little woman anymore, grateful for crumbs of recognition. I have evidence, David. Notebooks, emails, recorded conversations where you specifically asked to borrow my research for presentations. His face paled slightly. You recorded family conversations? That's a new low, Maria. No, David. The new low is when you used my early menopause diagnosis to push me out of my own research project. He had the decency to look momentarily ashamed before rallying. The board made that decision. You are the board. You and Erica and father's old golf partners. He picked up his briefcase, jaw tight. We're prepared to offer a settlement. Generous compensation in exchange for your silence and a full transfer of all research rights. I returned to my samples, voice steady. I'll see you in court, David. After he left, I sat in the sudden silence of my lab, hands shaking slightly. 30 years of compliance, broken in a single conversation. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating. I hadn't told him about my secret weapon, the research notebooks my grandmother Martha had encouraged me to keep separate from company records. Always maintain your own documentation, she'd advised before her death. Men have a way of forgetting where ideas originate. She'd known somehow. Perhaps she'd experienced the same erasure in her generation. Later that evening, as I recounted the confrontation to Joseph and the twins, the doorbell rang. Michael answered, returning with a thick manila envelope. Special delivery, he said, handing it to me. The courier made me sign for it. Inside was a formal letter from Thomson Research, terminating my health insurance coverage, pension contributions, and remaining stock options. Effective immediately. They're trying to scare you, Amanda said, reading over my shoulder. Typical intimidation tactic. And predictable, Joseph added. Renee warned this might happen. Are we going to be okay? Michael asked quietly, his artist sensitivity making him more attuned to the undercurrents of adult concern. I looked at my son, realizing this was the first time he'd seen adults in his life engaged in genuine conflict. The Thompsons managed their wars behind closed doors, presenting unified fronts regardless of private disagreements. My children had been raised in a different tradition: honesty, transparency, respect for emotions. We're going to be fine, I assured him. Financially, we prepared for this. Joseph and I have savings, and my grant funding is separate from Thomson Research. I'm not worried about money, Michael clarified. I'm worried about you. This is your family you're fighting. No, I said, reaching for his hand. You three are my family. The Thompsons are my relatives. There's a difference. That night, after the twins had gone to bed, Joseph and I sat on the back patio, the scent of night blooming jasmine wrapping around us like comfort. They'll escalate, he said quietly. Once they realize you won't back down. I know. The twins will hear things. At school, online. The Thompsons have too many connections in this city for this to stay contained. I nodded, having already considered this. Amanda and Michael deserve to see what it looks like when someone stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult, even when it's family. Joseph's hand found mine in the darkness. Martha would be proud of you. The thought of my grandmother brought a bittersweet smile. She used to tell me that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet voice saying, "I'll try again tomorrow." And here you are, trying again. We sat in companionable silence until the desert chill drove us indoors. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years, as if some tightly wound spring inside me had finally been released. The legal battle discovery phase. The lawsuit proceeded faster than I'd anticipated. Thomson Research's legal team, known for dragging out proceedings until opponents ran out of resources, seemed unusually eager to move forward. It was Renee who explained their strategy over coffee at her office. They want this settled before the NIH grant review, she said, spreading documents across her desk. Your sister's foundation has an application pending for $4.2 million in federal funding based on the hormone therapy research. If the ownership of that intellectual property comes into question, they lose the grant, I finished. And their primary funding source. Exactly. Which is why she tapped a particularly thick folder. Discovery is our best weapon. We're requesting every document, every email, every lab note that mentions your work over the past decade. Depositions were brutal 8-hour sessions where Erica maintained her practiced poise and David hid behind corporate policy. My parents submitted written statements rather than appear in person, their words formal and cold, expressing disappointment in Maria's attempt to damage the family legacy. Legacy. As if patents on technology that could help millions of women were merely decorative items on the family mantle. Did you specifically request that Dr. Maria Thompson be removed from the hormone regulation project? Renee asked David during his deposition. The board made that decision collectively. He replied, the evasion practiced. The board that you chair. Yes. And did you inform the board of Dr. Thompson's medical diagnosis prior to that decision? A pause. Her health concerns were relevant to project timelines. Her private medical information was relevant. Another pause. In a leadership capacity, yes. Back and forth they went, David becoming increasingly defensive as Renee methodically dismantled each evasion. By the fourth hour, his corporate polish had worn thin, revealing the insecurity beneath. Why was Erica Thompson named as lead researcher on the hormone therapy initiative despite having no scientific background in endocrinology? Renee asked. She's the foundation director, David snapped. It's her role to be the public face of our charitable initiatives. So she's the face, but not the brain behind the research. Objection, interjected Thompson's attorney. I'll rephrase, Renee said smoothly. Who conducted the actual laboratory research that led to the hormone therapy breakthrough? David's jaw tightened. Thompson Research employs many talented scientists, including, until recently, Dr. Maria Thompson, correct? Yes. Who led the hormone regulation project from its inception until 3 weeks ago? A long pause. Dr. Thompson was involved in early development. Was involved or led the project? She made significant contributions. Renee slid a document across the table. This is the NIH grant application submitted by the Erica Thompson Foundation. Please read the highlighted section aloud. David reluctantly complied. The breakthrough hormone delivery system, conceptualized and developed by Dr. Erica Thompson, represents a paradigm shift in women's health management. Is that statement accurate, Mr. Thompson? Even under oath, he couldn't quite bring himself to tell the truth. Erica oversaw the foundation's involvement in the project. That wasn't my question. Did Dr. Erica Thompson conceptualize and develop the hormone delivery system? A longer pause. The development was a team effort. A team led by whom? The silence stretched until David's attorney leaned over to whisper something. Finally, he answered, the research division, which at the time was headed by my sister, Maria. A small victory, but significant. The turning point came during document discovery. Thomson Research was forced to surrender internal communications about my research. Among them, emails between Erica and the Foundation board explicitly acknowledging me as the original researcher but strategizing how to transition intellectual ownership to establish Erica as the public face of the work. Most damning was an email from Erica to the marketing department. Maria's contribution should be minimized in press materials. She lacks the polish needed to represent the Foundation publicly, especially as she ages. Women's health initiatives require a youthful, vibrant spokesperson. When those emails were presented in court, I watched my sister's carefully constructed facade crack for the first time in our adult lives. For a brief moment, the polished Foundation director disappeared, replaced by the little girl who'd broken my science fair project the night before judging because there can't be two Thomson geniuses. That's when I realized she'd been afraid of me all along. The revelation didn't bring satisfaction, only a profound sadness. We could have been allies, Erica and I, combining her communication skills with my research expertise. Instead, we'd been pitted against each other in a family system that valued hierarchy over collaboration. During a court recess, I stepped into the hallway for air and found myself face to face with my mother. Helen Thompson stood perfectly poised in a tailored suit, hair immaculately styled, the picture of corporate success. But her eyes I'd inherited held something I'd rarely seen there. Uncertainty. Was this necessary, Maria? She asked softly. Dragging family matters into public view? It became necessary when my work was stolen, I replied evenly. She glanced around to ensure we weren't overheard. Your father is devastated. His blood pressure is concerning the doctors. The familiar weight of guilt pressed against my chest, the reflexive responsibility for others' emotions that had been my burden since childhood. I forced myself to breathe through it. I'm sorry he's unwell, I said sincerely. But I'm not responsible for his reaction to my standing up for myself. Something flickered across my mother's face, surprise, perhaps, or possibly recognition. You've changed. No, I corrected her gently. I've finally become who I always was. You just never saw her. She studied me with an intensity that reminded me of Amanda. I saw more than you think. Before I could respond, the bailiff called us back to the courtroom. My mother turned away, but not before I caught a glimpse of something in her expression that might have been pride. The verdict, a different kind of victory. The judge's ruling was decisive. My research remained mine. Thomson Research and the Erica Thompson Foundation were barred from using or profiting from any of my intellectual property without proper attribution and compensation. The financial settlement would be determined in a separate hearing. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Most gravitated toward Erica and David, hungry for the story of the powerful Thompson family's fall from grace. One young reporter broke away, approaching me instead. Dr. Thompson, how does it feel to reclaim your work after all these years? I considered the question carefully. It feels like finally becoming visible. Do you have any message for your family? I looked over at my sister and brother, surrounded by their legal team, faces tight with controlled fury. My parents hadn't attended the final hearing. No, I said quietly. I've said everything I needed to in court. That evening, Joseph, the twins, and I had a quiet dinner at home. No champagne, no elaborate celebration. Just the four of us, together in the space we created outside the Thompson shadow. Grandpa emailed, Amanda said cautiously, watching my reaction. He said he hopes you're proud and that Erica is gone and they're alone now. Emotional manipulation, Michael observed, always sensitive to undercurrents. He wants you to feel guilty. I nodded, surprisingly unmoved by my father's attempt. What did you tell him? Amanda looked down at her plate. I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, I assured her. Their relationship with you is separate from what happened between us. Is it though? Michael asked, his artist perception cutting to the heart. They never wanted us to exist. Not really. I reached across the table, taking each of their hands. You exist because I chose you. Because Joseph chose you. Because we built something real together, something no court ruling or family drama can ever diminish. I heard some kids at school talking, Michael continued, about the lawsuit, about us. My heart constricted. This was what I'd feared, my children bearing the weight of my choices. What did they say? Joseph asked, his voice carefully neutral. That the Thompsons disowned Mom because she had children without being married. Michael shrugged. Like that's somehow shocking in 2023. I set them straight, Amanda added, a fierce protectiveness in her voice. I told them Mom stood up against intellectual property theft and won, and that our family structure is none of their business. Pride bloomed in my chest. You shouldn't have to defend our choices. We're not defending them, Amanda said firmly. We're just stating facts. The fact is our family works. Better than most traditional ones, from what I've seen. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, Joseph and I sat on the back patio. The citrus trees we'd planted were silhouetted against the desert night, their scent mingling with desert sage. What now? He asked, his hand finding mine in the darkness. I thought about it. The settlement would provide enough funding to advance my research independently. Phoenix Biotech could become what I'd always envisioned, a company focused on accessible women's health technologies, not prestige or profit margins. Now I build something that can't be erased, I said. And the Thompsons? I sighed, feeling the complex weight of family history. They're still my parents. Still the twins' grandparents. But on different terms now. Joseph nodded, understanding as always. Boundaries, not walls. Exactly. My phone lit up with a text Renee with news about the financial settlement negotiations. The numbers made me blink in surprise. Thompson Research is offering full patent rights plus $2.3 million, I read aloud. They're desperate to end this quickly, Joseph observed. Before the NIH grant review next month, I agreed. Will you accept? I stared at the message, considering. The money would fully fund Phoenix Biotech's research for years, allow us to hire a proper team, upgrade equipment. But something felt unfinished. I want one more thing, I said slowly. Public acknowledgement. A press release stating that I developed the hormone therapy technology and Erica's foundation is licensing it from me. They'll fight that, Joseph warned. Then we go back to court, I replied, the determination in my voice surprising even me. This was never just about money. It's about truth. I responded to Renee with my terms, then set the phone aside. Above us, the desert sky sparkled with stars, vast and humbling. For most of my life, I'd felt small beneath the Thompson legacy, a footnote in someone else's story. Now, at 55, I was finally writing my own. You know what's strange? I said to Joseph as we sat together in companionable silence. I don't hate them. Not even Erica. I just feel sad for what could have been. Joseph's fingers intertwined with mine. That's grace, Maria. And it's entirely your choice whether to extend it. Like family, I murmured. Entirely my choice now. Epilogue 1 year later. The citrus trees had flourished over the year, their branches now heavy with fruit. I stood in the backyard, morning coffee warming my hands, watching the sunrise paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. At 56, I found myself appreciating these quiet moments more, the brilliance of desert light, the complex scent of blooming jasmine, the distant calls of morning doves. Phoenix Biotech had grown too, not explosively, but steadily. We'd secured FDA approval for our early hormone detection system, designed specifically for rural clinics and underserved communities. The grant funding had come through last month, allowing us to expand our research team. Amanda had started interning in the lab on weekends, her scientific aptitude blossoming under proper mentorship. The settlement with Thompson Research had included everything I demanded: financial compensation, patent rights, and public acknowledgement of my work. The press release had been brief but clear. Thompson Research acknowledges Dr. Maria Thompson as the primary developer of the hormone regulation therapy technology, now licensed to the Women's Health Initiative under revised attribution guidelines. The corporate language couldn't disguise the victory it represented. My name, my work, finally acknowledged. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. A courier delivery, a small package, no return address. Inside, nestled in bubble wrap, was a sapphire ring I recognized immediately. Grandmother Martha's wedding ring, the one Erica had claimed after her death. A note accompanied it, written in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. This belongs with you. It always did. H. No apology, no explanation of how she'd gotten it from Erica, no invitation to reconnect, just acknowledgement of a truth too long denied. I slipped the ring onto my finger, its familiar weight both strange and comforting. From the kitchen, I could hear Amanda and Michael bickering good-naturedly over breakfast, Joseph's calm voice mediating. 16 years old now, they were becoming themselves, Amanda already talking about biochemistry programs for college, Michael filling sketchbooks with increasingly confident art. My relationship with my parents had shifted into something neither close nor entirely severed. Occasional emails, carefully worded. A brief visit at Christmas, stiff but civil. My father, humbled by the public revelation of Thomson Research's practices, had stepped down as board chairman, citing health concerns. My mother had surprised everyone by rejoining the company's scientific advisory board, her chemistry background suddenly remembered and valued. Erica and I remained estranged, our wounds too deep for casual reconciliation. But last month, she published an article in a women's business magazine that mentioned me by name. My sister's scientific brilliance taught me that recognition must be earned, not claimed. A small acknowledgement, perhaps, but significant from someone who had spent decades pretending my contributions didn't exist. David had left Thomson Research entirely, moving to California to join a tech startup. His departure email, copied to the entire company, had included a line that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I've learned, too late perhaps, that family legacy is built on honest recognition, not strategic omission. Too little, too late. Perhaps. But also evidence that even deeply entrenched patterns could change. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Winters, my menopause specialist. Hormone levels stabilizing. No further treatment needed. Congratulations on the FDA approval. We'll be using your testing kits at the clinic. I smiled at the symmetry. The very condition my family had used to push me out had led directly to research that would help thousands of women navigate the same transition with dignity and support. Joseph appeared at the patio door, coffee in hand. You okay? He asked, noticing the ring. I'm not just okay, I said, the morning light catching the sapphire's blue depths. I'm exactly who I was meant to be. Behind him, the twins emerged, arguing about who would drive with Joseph to their weekend activities. Their voices filled the space with a kind of comfortable chaos that had always been absent in the Thompson household, a messy, authentic, alive. I thought of my father's email from months ago. We're alone now. He'd meant it as an accusation, a final attempt at control through guilt. But he'd revealed a truth he didn't intend. They were alone because they chose an image over connection, appearance over authenticity, power over love. As I watched Joseph and the twins load into his car, waving as they pulled away, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I had chosen differently. I hadn't fought to be remembered. I'd built something too real to be erased. Later that afternoon, I sat in my lab at Phoenix Biotech, finalizing the protocol for our next clinical trial. The space had evolved from its humble beginnings, new equipment, a small but dedicated team, windows that looked out on the desert landscape rather than interior corridors. My phone rang an unfamiliar number. I answered to hear a young woman's voice. Dr. Thompson? My name is Sarah Reyes. I'm a graduate student at Arizona State. I read your paper on hormone detection technologies for underserved populations and, well, I was wondering if Phoenix Biotech has any internship opportunities. We might, I replied, smiling at the eagerness in her voice, the same enthusiasm I'd once felt before family dynamics complicated my scientific journey. Tell me about your research interests. As she spoke, I twirled grandmother Martha's ring on my finger, thinking about how differently this young scientist's career might unfold, her work acknowledged, her contributions valued, her name on her discoveries. That was the real victory, not just reclaiming my research, but helping create a world where the next generation of women scientists wouldn't need to fight the same battles, where they could simply be seen. Can I ask you something, Dr. Thompson? Sarah said after describing her research experience. What made you start Phoenix Biotech after so many years at Thomson Research? That transition mid-career, it's inspiring, but it must have been difficult. I considered the question, looking around at the lab I'd built, thinking of the family I'd chosen, the boundaries I'd established, the truth I'd finally spoken. It was difficult, I acknowledged, but not as difficult as staying somewhere that required me to be less than I am. After we scheduled her interview and ended the call, I returned to my work, grandmother Martha's sapphire catching the afternoon light. The ring had finally found its way home, just as I had. Family doesn't abandon you in a foreign country. They don't crop you out of memories, then toast to your absence. The words appeared on my screen, sharp and defiant against the white background. My finger hovered over the post button for half a second before I pressed it. There I sat, in a small Italian hotel room, 46 years old, alone in a foreign country, passport gone, money stolen, and the cruel realization settling in my chest like concrete. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. By my sister. By my mother. By my family. My hands trembled not from fear, but from clarity as I whispered to the empty room. This time I'm not disappearing. That's when my phone pinged with a notification. Victoria's latest Instagram post showed her and her friends toasting champagne glasses with the caption, "When dead weight disappears on its own." Hash good vibes. And below it, a heart emoji from our 75-year-old mother. For most of my life, I had been Eleanor Wright, the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one who shrinks. But sitting there in that Tuscan hotel room, I felt something shift inside me, the beginning of a woman I barely recognized, yet had always been. This is how I stopped being invisible. Flashback the invitation. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been sitting at my desk at the legal aid clinic in Portland, scrolling through case files of domestic abuse survivors, women who, like me, had learned to make themselves smaller to survive. The irony wasn't lost on me. My phone lit up with a text from Victoria. Italy this spring. Family reconnection. You in? A photo of sun-drenched Tuscan vineyards followed, along with a heart emoji. I stared at the message, feeling that familiar flutter of hope, the one that never seemed to learn its lesson. At 46, I should have known better. But there's something about family that keeps you coming back, like a moth to a flame that has burned you countless times before. Dad would have wanted us to try again, was the follow-up text that sealed it. Our father, Raymond, had passed away 8 months ago. His absence had left a vacuum in our already fragile family dynamic. I remembered his gentle hand on my shoulder at family gatherings, the only anchor in a storm of my mother's critical glances and Victoria's cutting remarks. Sure, I texted back. I love that. I could almost hear Victoria's voice in my head. You're too serious, Ellie. No one knows what to do with silence. A line she'd been using since we were teenagers, her way of making my thoughtfulness a character flaw. As I prepared for the trip, packing sensible shoes and practical clothes that Victoria would inevitably criticize, I thought about our childhood. Victoria, 5 years older, had always been our mother's mirror image, confident, socially adept, demanding attention. Margaret Wright, a former elementary school teacher with perfectionist tendencies, had molded Victoria in her image while regarding me with a mixture of confusion and disappointment. Eleanor lives in her head too much, she would tell relatives at family gatherings, as if my introspection was a diagnosis. Victoria, though, she knows how to work a room. I folded another neutral-colored blouse into my suitcase and wondered, not for the first time, why I was still seeking approval from people who had made it clear they had none to give. Tuscany, the unraveling. The villa in Tuscany was everything the brochure promised. Terracotta and stone, surrounded by cypress trees and vineyards rolling to the horizon. It would have been perfect if not for the undercurrent of tension that arrived with us. Victoria had brought her friends, Pamela Anderson and Catherine Miller, both affluent women in their early 50s who regarded me with the same benign curiosity one might have for an exotic but unremarkable pet. So, Eleanor still works at that. What is it again? Homeless shelter? Pamela asked Victoria over aperitifs on our first evening. Legal aid clinic, I corrected gently. For domestic abuse survivors. That's nice, Catherine responded with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Must be so fulfilling to do something meaningful. Victoria laughed, that practice sound that wasn't really laughter at all. Eleanor's always been the family saint. Isn't that right, sis? I smiled tightly, taking a sip of my wine instead of responding. The subtle dig was familiar territory, Victoria's way of reframing my career choices as moral superiority rather than genuine passion. The next day, we joined a small group tour of local wineries. The Tuscan landscape unfurled before us like a Renaissance painting, golden light, ancient stone, and vineyards heavy with promise. But even the beauty couldn't ease the growing knot in my stomach. In the tasting room of the second winery, the sommelier asked for our impressions of a local Sangiovese. Perfectly balanced, Victoria announced with authority. Notes of cherry and tobacco, wouldn't you say? The sommelier nodded approvingly. I actually taste more blackberry than cherry, I ventured. And there's an earthiness that reminds me of. Oh, Eleanor, Victoria interrupted with a laugh. Always the contrarian. I'm not being contrary, I said quietly. I'm just sharing what I taste. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. You always have to be different, don't you? The sommelier, sensing tension, quickly moved on to the next wine. Later, during lunch in the winery's courtyard, I excused myself to use the restroom. When I returned, the table was empty. No purses hanging from chairs, no half-eaten plates of pasta, no glasses of wine catching the Tuscan sunlight. At first, I thought they'd moved to another table. I scanned the courtyard, then the interior dining room. Nothing. A waiter approached. Signora, your party has left. They said to tell you they are continuing to the next winery. Left? I echoed, confusion turning to disbelief. But, my bag, my passport. The waiter shrugged apologetically. They took everything, Signora. They said you would understand. I stood there, stunned into stillness, as realization washed over me. They had left deliberately. Victoria, Pamela, Catherine, they had planned this. I reached for my phone only to remember it was in my purse, which Victoria had insisted on carrying for safety. All I had was the small coin purse in my pocket with a few euros. A cold, sick feeling settled in my stomach as I remembered Victoria's smile that morning, too bright, too knowing. You're going to love today, Ellie, she'd said. It's going to be unforgettable. The streaming night fell on the Tuscan countryside with a beauty that felt like mockery. The winery owner's wife, Maria, had taken pity on me, this American woman abandoned by her family. Despite the language barrier, her kindness transcended words. She offered me a small room above the tasting room and a simple meal of bread, cheese, and olives. As I sat by the window, watching stars appear over the vineyard, I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for Victoria's behavior, for my mother's coldness. How many times had I told myself it was my fault for being too sensitive, too quiet, too much or not enough of whatever they wanted? Mi dispias, Maria said, setting a glass of water beside me. I am sorry. I nodded, unable to explain that her simple kindness hurt almost as much as my family's betrayal. To be seen by a stranger when your own blood looked through you, there was something devastating in that comparison. In the small room, I lay awake replaying moments from the past. Victoria as a teenager, cutting my name from family photos as a joke. My mother forgetting to set a place for me at holiday dinners. The time I graduated with honors and neither attended the ceremony, claiming prior commitments that later proved to be a shopping trip. But this, abandoning me in a foreign country, this was different. This crossed a line I couldn't rationalize away. By morning, resolve had replaced shock. I borrowed Maria's phone to call the American embassy, but the wait time was hours. Instead, I accepted her offer to drive me to the nearest town with a tourist information center. It was there, in the small medieval town of Montepulciano, that fate intervened in the form of a familiar face. Unexpected reunion, Eleanor? Eleanor, right? I turned at the sound of my name, disbelieving. There in the sunlit piazza stood Thomas Bennett, my high school friend, now a distinguished-looking man in his late 40s with kind eyes and a beard streaked with silver. Thomas? I managed, the surrealism of the moment washing over me. What are you doing in Italy? Research for a book series. I'm an editor now, he explained, his eyes taking in my disheveled appearance with concern. Are you all right? You look like I've been abandoned in a foreign country by my family. I finished with a bitter laugh that surprised even me. His expression shifted from confusion to concern. Let me buy you a coffee. Or something stronger. An hour later, sitting at a cafe overlooking the rolling Tuscan hills, I had told him everything: the invitation, the subtle digs, the abandonment, and the realization that it had been planned all along. Thomas listened without interruption, his face growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, he sat back, shaking his head. I wish I could say I'm surprised, he said finally. But I remember Victoria from school. And your mother, at graduation. What about graduation? I asked, surprised. Thomas hesitated. Your valedictorian speech. Everyone was on their feet applauding, except your mother. She just sat there, arms crossed, completely stone-faced. I always wondered if you noticed. A memory surfaced, me scanning the crowd afterwards, looking for my mother's face, finding only empty seats where my family had been. I think I blocked it out, I admitted. Like so many other things. Thomas reached across the table, his hand covering mine briefly. You deserve better, Eleanor. You always did. The simple validation broke something loose inside me. Tears I had been holding back for decades threatened to spill. I have a hotel room in Florence, Thomas said gently. Let me help you get back on your feet. We can figure out next steps from there. For once, I didn't resist the offer of help. Florence, the discovery. Thomas's hotel in Florence was elegant without being ostentatious. In the safety of a borrowed room, with a borrowed phone charger, I finally accessed my email and social media accounts. What I found made my blood run cold. Victoria's Instagram showed her and her friends at various Tuscan locations, laughing, posing with wine glasses, captioning photos with phrases like best girls trip ever. And finally, just the right company. In one photo taken at a Florence restaurant, I could see my passport peeking from Victoria's handbag. Worse was a private message from Jennifer Collins, a former colleague. Eleanor, you need to see this. Attached was a screenshot of a group chat where Victoria wrote, finally ditched the dead weight in Tuscany. Mom's thrilled. Should have done this years ago. My mother had responded with a thumbs up emoji. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone cradled in my hands, a strange calm settling over me. This wasn't new behavior. It was just the most extreme version of what they'd been doing my entire life. A notification popped up, an email from Sarah Goldman, the family lawyer who had handled my father's estate. Eleanor, I've been trying to reach you. There's something you need to know about your father's will. My heart pounded as I opened the email. Your father established a separate trust for you before his passing. Victoria was supposed to inform you months ago. When I didn't hear from you, I became concerned. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I stared at the screen, the pieces falling into place. Victoria hadn't just abandoned me in Italy for fun. She had been hiding financial information from me. My father, even in death, had tried to protect me, and Victoria had sabotaged his final act of love. With shaking hands, I dialed Sarah's number. Eleanor, she answered immediately. Thank God. I've been worried. What trust? I asked without preamble. Sarah's voice turned professional. Your father established an educational trust for you 6 months before his passing. He was concerned that your mother and sister would. Well, he wanted to ensure you had resources of your own. How much? I asked, barely breathing. The initial amount was $250,000. It's grown since then. The room seemed to tilt. Victoria knew. She was present when your father signed the documents. She was supposed to give you the paperwork after the mandatory waiting period. When she told me you weren't interested, I had doubts, but legally. I never received anything, I said, my voice hollow. I suspected as much, Sarah replied grimly. There's more. Someone attempted to access the trust using documents with your signature. The bank flagged it as suspicious. Forgery, I braked. Almost certainly. I have the forensic report if you need it. A memory flashed, Victoria asking me to sign a routine insurance document when I'd visited after Dad's funeral. I'd been too grief-stricken to read it carefully. There's one more thing, Sarah continued. Your father left you a recorded message. Victoria was supposed to give you the access information. Minute later, I was listening to my father's voice for the first time since his death. Weak from illness but determined, he spoke directly to me. Eleanor, my quiet warrior. If you're hearing this, I'm gone, and I hope you're doing all right. I've always seen your strength, even when you couldn't. The way you fight for others while asking nothing for yourself, it's remarkable. But it's time you fought for yourself too. This trust is for you to build whatever life you choose, free from obligations. I know things haven't been easy with your mother and Victoria. That's on me too. I should have done more. But know this, I've always been proudest of you. Your compassion, your integrity, these are rare gifts. Don't let anyone dim your light, Ellie. Not even family. Especially not family. Tears streamed down my face as his voice faded. All these years, I thought no one had seen me. But my father had. He'd seen everything. That night, I made a decision. I opened my laptop and began to write. The essay. The words flowed easily, years of unspoken truths finding their way onto the page. I titled it simply, What Family Didn't Tell Me. I wrote about growing up invisible, about a childhood spent seeking approval that never came. I wrote about Victoria's manipulation and my mother's enablement. I wrote about being abandoned in Tuscany, about discovering the trust, about finally hearing my father's voice telling me I mattered. It wasn't angry or accusatory, just honest in a way I had never allowed myself to be. When I finished, I sat back, physically exhausted but mentally clear. The essay wasn't for Victoria or my mother. It wasn't even for the readers who might find it. It was for me, a declaration of existence. I posted it on my rarely used blog, then closed my laptop and slept more deeply than I had in years. The response was unexpected. By morning, the post had been shared hundreds of times. Comments flooded in from people with similar stories, invisible children, family scapegoats, survivors of emotional neglect. Thank you for giving this a name, one wrote. I thought I was the only one, said another. Then came the backlash. A furious email from Victoria. Take this down immediately. You're embarrassing the family with your pathetic victim narrative. A voicemail from my mother. Eleanor, I don't know what game you're playing, but this behavior is unacceptable. We invited you on a lovely trip, and this is how you repay us? By airing family matters publicly? Call me when you're ready to apologize. They still didn't get it. They never would. More surprisingly came an email from Sophia Martinez, a former friend of Victoria's I barely remembered. I've been watching this unfold. Victoria has been trying to erase you for years. I have evidence if you want it. Evidence. The word hung in my mind like a promise. The confrontation 2 days later, armed with Sarah's legal documents, my father's recorded message, and a file of evidence from Sophia, social media posts, text messages, and altered photographs spanning years. I agreed to meet Victoria at a cafe in Florence. She arrived like she was attending a board meeting, designer suit, perfect makeup, sunglasses hiding her eyes even indoors. The cafe was busy enough for privacy through noise, but quiet enough that we wouldn't need to shout. This little publicity stunt needs to end, she said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from me. You're making the family look dysfunctional. The family is dysfunctional, I replied calmly. Victoria's lips thinned. Always the victim, aren't you, Eleanor? Poor little sister, never getting enough attention. It's exhausting. I studied her, this woman who shared my blood but seemed incapable of basic empathy. Had she always been this way, or had our mother's favoritism twisted her? Why did you leave me in Tuscany? I asked directly. Victoria shrugged. It was a joke. You've always been too sensitive. A joke? I echoed. Taking my passport? My money? Posting online about ditching dead weight? You weren't supposed to see those posts, she muttered, the first crack in her composure. Just like I wasn't supposed to know about Dad's trust? I asked quietly. Her head snapped up, eyes widening behind her sunglasses. Sarah Goldman called me, I continued. She told me everything. The trust. The forged documents. Dad's message. She had no right. She had every right. I'm the beneficiary. Victoria's face hardened. Mom will never believe you. It's always been the two of us. You're the outsider. I placed my phone on the table. I have Dad's message. Would you like to hear it together? For the first time in our adult lives, I saw fear flicker across Victoria's face. What do you want? She asked, voice low. Nothing from you, I replied honestly. Not anymore. I'm filing paperwork to claim my trust. I'm also filing a police report about the theft of my passport and personal belongings. Whether that results in charges is up to the authorities. You wouldn't, she whispered. I already have, I answered. This isn't revenge, Victoria. It's consequences. Mom will disown you, she threatened. I almost laughed. How can you disown someone you never owned in the first place? I stood up, leaving money for my untouched coffee. This is the last time we'll speak. Not because I hate you, but because I finally love myself enough to walk away. Victoria's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. You're making a mistake, she hissed. Family is all you have. I gently removed her hand. No, I said softly. Family is supposed to be people who love you. I'm just now figuring out who those people really are. I walked away, feeling lighter with each step. The confrontation I'd feared my entire life had come and gone, and I was still standing. The mother. I wasn't surprised when my hotel room phone rang an hour later, or when the front desk informed me that Margaret Wright was in the lobby requesting to see me. My mother had always been Victoria's cleanup crew, smoothing over conflicts with a combination of guilt and manipulation. I almost declined the visit, but something in me, perhaps my father's quiet warrior, wanted completion. She looked older than I remembered, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. As she entered my room, I noticed her hands trembling. Victoria called me, she said without greeting. She's very upset. I imagine she is, I replied, remaining standing. Would you like some water? She ignored the offer. Eleanor, I don't know what's gotten into you. This public drama, these accusations, it's beneath you. Is it beneath me to want the truth? I asked. To expect basic decency from my family? We invited you on a lovely trip. You abandoned me in a foreign country, I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. You took my passport, my money, and then celebrated online. Victoria says it was a misunderstanding. My mother counted weakly. Does this look like a misunderstanding? I opened my laptop, showing her Victoria's Instagram posts, the group chat screenshots, the evidence Sophia had provided of years of deliberate exclusion. My mother's face paled as she scrolled through the images. I didn't know about all this, she said finally. Didn't you? I asked gently. Or didn't you want to know? She looked away. Victoria has always been sensitive. She needed more attention. And I needed none? I asked. Not even at my graduation? My honors ceremony? My mother had the grace to flinch. I thought you were strong enough not to need it. The irony was staggering. That's the problem, Mom. You confused my silence for strength. It wasn't strength. It was survival. She sat heavily on the edge of the bed. What happens now? Victoria says you're threatening legal action. I'm claiming what Dad left me, I clarified. And yes, I've reported the theft of my passport. What happens with that is up to the authorities. And us? She asked, her voice small. I paused, really looking at my mother, this woman who had given me life but never really seen me. There was no satisfaction in her distress, only a sad recognition of what could have been. I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm not closing any doors permanently. But I need space, and I need to know that if we ever have a relationship again, it will be built on truth. She nodded slowly, something like respect flickering in her eyes. You sound like your father. Thank you, I said, meaning it. That's the greatest compliment you could give me. As she stood to leave, she hesitated. The trust. Raymond never told me. He knew you'd try to talk him out of it. I said simply. She didn't deny it. At the door, she turned back. Will you come home? I shook my head. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time. I need to figure out what home really means. After she left, I stood at the window, watching the Florentine sunset paint the ancient buildings in gold and amber. I wasn't naive enough to think one conversation had changed a lifetime of patterns, but something had shifted, not just in my mother, but in me. Epilogue is 6 months later. The small apartment in Montepulciano catches the morning light perfectly. From my writing desk, I can see the piazza coming to life, shopkeepers opening shutters, elderly men gathering for their morning coffee, tourists consulting maps with excitement. 6 months ago, I decided to stay in Italy, not running from my past, but walking deliberately into a future of my own making. Thomas connected me with a small publishing house interested in my essay, which has now expanded into a memoir titled The Invisible Daughter. The advance from the book, combined with my father's trust, has given me freedom I never imagined possible. I've taken a sabbatical from the legal aid clinic, though I still consult remotely on cases that need my expertise. Thomas visits when his work brings him to Italy. Our friendship has deepened into something neither of us is rushing to define. There's healing in being seen for exactly who you are, especially when you've spent a lifetime being overlooked. Victoria hasn't contacted me since Florence. My mother sends carefully worded emails every few weeks, superficial at first, gradually becoming more reflective. I answer when I feel strong enough. This morning, I received a package from Sarah Goldman, a small box my father had left with her, to be delivered to me when the time was right. Inside was a simple journal filled with his handwriting, observations about me from childhood through adulthood. Eleanor, age 7, stood up to a playground bully today. Not with fists, but with words. That quiet strength will serve her well. Eleanor's college application essay moved me to tears. She sees the world with such compassion. Margaret says she's too sensitive for her own good. I think the world needs more sensitivity, not less. Eleanor graduates with honors next week, working full-time while completing her degree. No complaints, just determination. Victoria says I favor Eleanor. Perhaps I do see myself more in her, though I've tried to love them equally. The final entry, dated just weeks before his death. Eleanor visited today. She thinks I don't notice how she checks the medication schedule, how she brings food she knows I can keep down. Victoria talks about her charity work. Eleanor simply does the work without needing recognition. I worry about what will happen when I'm gone. Margaret has always seen Victoria's needs as more urgent and Eleanor as self-sufficient. But nobody is self-sufficient. We all need to be seen. I close the journal, tears streaming down my face. Through all those years of feeling invisible, one person had seen me clearly. My phone buzzes with a text from Thomas. Lunch at Mario's? They have that pasta you love. I smile and type back. See you at 1. Outside, the Italian sun bathes the ancient stones in warmth. I've begun learning Italian, making friends in the small community, finding my place in a world where I'm neither invisible nor defined by family expectations. Sometimes family is who you're born to. Sometimes it's who you find along the way. And sometimes, the most important family member to reconcile with is yourself. As I prepare to leave for lunch, I catch my reflection in the mirror, a woman in her late 40s with clear eyes and an easy smile, no longer shrinking, no longer apologizing for the space she occupies in the world. My father called me his quiet warrior. It took losing everything to discover he was right.